Factory farms are unhealthy to humans and animals, plain and simple. According to a recent article in Plant-Based News, humans are the only species responsible for coronavirus, say leading scientists. The authors say recent pandemics are a direct consequence of human activity, particularly on a global and financial and economic systems, based on a limited paradigm that prizes economic growth at any cost.
Are you ready to live the life you deserve? Do you want to feel vibrantly healthy and reach your optimal weight without dieting while being kind to animals and the planet? Then you're in the right place at the right time. Welcome to Plant-Based Eating for Health with your host, certified plant-based nutritionist, Kathleen Gage.
When we were first asked to shelter at home, it seemed like a reasonable solution to a scary problem. COVID-19 seemed to come out of nowhere, yet most people believed it would be a short-term solution, gladly sacrificing a few days at home for the good of all. Yet, truth be told, it's likely 99.9% of people had no idea what was in store. Within days of COVID-19 being classified as a pandemic, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of men and women were losing their jobs. Many people lost as much as 40 to 50% of their stock investments. Businesses were being forced to shut down. Domestic violence cases were on the rise. Suicides were seeing an increase and confusion set in. Initially, we were told the shelter in place and the closure of businesses would be a short-term solution. In a couple of weeks, we will be at the 2-month mark of shelter at home, non-essential businesses being closed and many going bankrupt and other life-altering changes. Needless to say, this has turned our economy upside down. With a record number of people filing for unemployment, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. As of April 16th, 22 million Americans filed for unemployment in a 4-week period. Food banks are running dry. Rent is overdue. Mortgage companies are getting daily calls to postpone payments from people unable to pay their mortgage. According to some studies, before the pandemic hit, about 40% of Americans would struggle to come up with $400 for an unexpected expense. In fast order, we saw how true this is. Even those with so-called high-paying jobs found themselves strapped when their paychecks came to a screeching halt. Even though there are mixed reviews as to how effective the stay-at-home orders are, as well as shutting down businesses big and small, how much it really has been, other than to cripple the economy, there are actions we've made changes on that on the surface seem to make sense. But in light of so many conflicting reports, one is left to wonder how effective they actually are. Let's start with the changes we have already made, and then let's look at what else is changing. We're also going to look at what we can do to minimize the risk. Let me start by saying the epidemic is real. People around the globe are contracting COVID-19. As of April 29, 2020, there have been 3,121,118 coronavirus cases with 216,508 deaths and 947,209 recoveries. In the United States, there have been over 1 million cases with 58,000 deaths and 140,000 recovered, which leaves 830,000 active cases. One is left to wonder why there are still so many active cases in the United States compared to the rest of the world. But that's a discussion for another time. Add to this the fact that factory farms are shutting down due to the number of cases and deaths occurring in the very locations where food is processed, and the fear factor increases for a great many people. In the cases of factory farms, rather than admit that these plants are breeding grounds for disease, contamination, viruses, and countless injuries, the powers that be are doing all they can to get public support and sympathy for what they deem as a major food shortage and a break in the food supply chain. They're doing all they can to mislead the public by convincing people they will experience protein deficiencies if they don't eat animal-based products. Nothing could be further from the truth. I will address that shortly. The truth of the matter is this: factory farms are unhealthy to humans and animals, plain and simple. According to a recent article in Plant-Based News, humans are the only species responsible for coronavirus, say leading scientists. The authors say recent pandemics are a direct consequence of human activity, particularly on a global and financial and economic systems, based on a limited paradigm that prizes economic growth at any cost. What many people are conveniently ignoring are the documented reports stating that a majority of COVID-19 deaths are a result of pre-existing conditions such as obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease near the top. When people hear this, they often come to the rescue of strangers with a statement like, "That's not fair to make people think they had a hand in their illness." This is where I have to speak out. Granted, there are some conditions that are genetics, but as one well-known doctor in the plant-based lifestyle world says, we often don't inherit genes, but we do inherit recipes. What this simply means is that we are taught unhealthy behaviors from childhood. With the underlying causes on the rise, doesn't it make sense to sound the alarm? For example, the National Center for Health Statistics estimates that for 2015 and 16, in the U.S., 39.8% of adults aged 20 and over were obese, including 7.6% with severe obesity, and that another 31.8% were overweight. Obesity rates have increased for all population groups in the United States over the last few decades. To pretend there isn't more to our health situation than the surface statistics is literally killing us. Not only are people cutting their lives short by what they consume, they're also contributing to skyrocketing healthcare costs. Again, we can pretend this is not part of the mix, but that's like having a child play near a swamp filled with alligators and then acting as if the child is 100% safe, and at some point the gators won't come to get the child. The gators are coming. Fast and furious. According to many experts and medical reports, most of the population will contract the virus. However, the majority won't even know they've had it. They will be asymptomatic. This is where things get sketchy. Although a relatively healthy person may not get severely sick, be hospitalized, and die from the virus, they can infect others who are at high risk, like elderly people. That's where the life-saving guidelines come in. These are guidelines intended to keep not just us as safe as possible, but family and friends who are at high risk. You would have to live under a rock to not have heard the guidelines. It started with common sense strategies that many people were already doing, while others needed to remind themselves to constantly take these steps. I'll post a link to a blog article I wrote about all the restrictions that were implemented one at a time. Imagine if we would have been asked to do all of them at once. It would have been even more detrimental than what we are experiencing currently. Although the guidelines are well intended, with the current quarantine fatigue, many people are throwing their hands up in the air and giving in to unsafe activities. Over the last weekend, there was no shortage of media reports of people gathering at beaches and parks, completely ignoring social distancing and refusing to cover their mouth and nose. On my most recent visit to the grocery store, the strict behaviors, as of just as recently as 2 weeks ago, were not top of the mind for many people. Only a handful of people had masks on. Social distancing was not enforced, and the fear I saw in people's eyes previously were now replaced with frustration and downright anger and rudeness. One thing was evident: toilet paper is still at a premium. With the recent shutdowns of the factory farms, people are giving way to hoarding meat products, which is only going to intensify the danger. Think about it. There have been high numbers of COVID cases in factory farms, the very places the meat comes out of. Rather than hoard the meat, they would be significantly better off eliminating meat altogether from their plate. By doing so, they would take control of their health in ways many have never even imagined. The spokespeople for places like Tyson are playing on people's sympathy when they say, "We're going to have to kill all those animals." What the hell do people think they do with the animals in the first place? They kill them. These are the very animals bred in captivity against their will, kept in very inhumane conditions where disease is rampant, and their only purpose is to satisfy humans' desire for animal products. Folks, this is where education needs to happen. The images we have of animals roaming joyfully on big green pastures is a thing of the past. The meat and dairy that people are consuming are raised in horrendous environments, yet they claim it's their right. Worse yet, at the time of me sharing this information with you, word has it that the president is going to mandate the meat plants to open up. Regardless of the health risks, it appears that once again, it's profits over people. This is outrageous, but coming from our current administration, it's not surprising that one more time, a decision is being made that is not in the best interest of people at large, but rather the benefit of the financial gains of a small percentage of people. What's amazing is that people are willing to have their world turned upside down to avoid contracting a disease that has a mortality rate that is far less than many diseases we have come to deem as normal, but ask them to give up their bacon, cheeseburgers, steaks, and pork chops, and you would think you asked them to burn their house down. When you look at how broken our infrastructure with healthcare, finances, health, and disease is, doesn't it make sense that now is a perfect time to change the very habits that are contributing to all this in the first place? For some, it does. For others, they will hear this information and run out and grab a bag of fries, cheeseburger, and a shake. That's the comfort food that got them to where they are in the first place. The fact is, we do have more control over our health than many people care to admit. To assure you are giving yourself the greatest advantage, it's recommended to give up all animal and dairy products. Check out other episodes of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show to hear from men and women who have literally turned their lives around by going 100% plant-based. In addition, check out books like Eat to Live and Fast Food Genocide by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Another great choice is How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. And let's definitely have you read The China Study by Dr. Colin T. Campbell. The documentary Forks Over Knives is a must-watch to fully understand the power of a plant-based lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen, I implore you, look at what you're doing, look at your contribution to your health, look at your contribution to the environment, and most of all, think of the animals. When you think of factory farms, think of the pain and suffering these animals go through to get on somebody's plate. The time has arrived to change. We must change. We have to change. There's no two ways about it. If the current health situation hasn't shown us that we really created a house of cards, then nothing will. I encourage you, check out the podcast, check out the blog, and most of all, take care of your health. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health, encouraging you, go out, live healthy.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.